May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts and minds be ever acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. At first, this passage can sound kind of threatening. In the parable that Jesus tells, the fig tree is under threat of being cut down. But the gardener asks the vineyard owner to let him put some work into the tree. The gardener asks, "Let me dig around it and put manure on it." Sometimes I feel like I'm in the same peril as that fig tree. We are finite human beings with limitations and limited abilities. Limitations that never seem to meet up with the expectations of the world. There seem to be so many expectations in this world. Do well at school, get a job that earns a lot of money, get a family, try to meet the ideals of body image, get a house. We are bombarded with messages that tell us that having all of these things is what it means to be successful. Sometimes the pressure comes from the media. Sometimes the pressure comes from friends or family. Sometimes we create high expectations for ourselves. I've certainly felt that there are expectations that I cannot hope to meet. I've mentioned at other times some of my struggles with the neurodifference, namely the difficulty with reading and writing, and the difficulty with getting accommodations when I've talked about issues of justice. Today I'm going to speak a little about some of the frustrating feelings that this difficulty has created over the years. Functionally, my learning difference means that I take a lot longer, at the very least double, sometimes 3 times as long as the average person to read or write. In primary grades, this meant that I would be the last one working at my desk while the rest of the class got to go to the carpet for story time. Actually, at the end of the story, I would usually still be at my desk. Yet, I would be able to answer the questions that the teacher asked about the story. As I got older, I eventually started to write tests in different rooms than the rest of the class. This was helpful, but it also meant that whenever there was a test, the rest of the class would see me get up and leave, and it started a pattern of working in isolation on my own. And although extensions were granted with assignments, asking for these extensions always felt like I was confessing some sort of failure. And the doubled time still had to be put in, which meant by the time I got to high school, I was usually working till 2 o'clock in the morning or later, aside from a nap and supper. So most school assignments were a daily reminder that I did things alone and that I was not as fast as everyone else. The same thing continued when I got to university. Actually, when COVID struck, there were a number of things that did not feel all that different to how I had been living my life beforehand. Now, my life was not and is not completely isolated. I do have some friends that I get to spend time with. But whenever I used to spend time on something social or on something fun, I would often feel a lot of anxiety that it would be at the cost of my schoolwork. All of this to say that I got a lot of experience working alone at night with only my thoughts of inadequacy for company. It was not comforting. And I internalized the thought that I was just supposed to keep working alone. I felt like that fruitless fig tree, under a threat that if I did not produce fruit, I would be removed from the garden. In a little bit, I'll tell you how I learned to deal with this. Now, in this story, God and the gardener don't just simply make fruit grow on the tree. I think that God and God's grace is something like the gardener, a gardener who challenged the master the owner of the vineyard, when he asked to put some more work into the tree. And sometimes challenging authority or masters can be a very dangerous prospect, a danger that Jesus certainly lived with on a regular basis. The gardener puts work into the fig tree, though. He asks, "Let me dig around it and put manure on it." Well, growing up, my family and I liked to garden. Perhaps some of you also enjoy gardening. My family's garden has included a variety of small trees over the years, from lilacs to cedars to rose bushes, but we've also had a fig tree. And there are a number of memories that come to mind when I think about this passage. Having a fruitful fig tree takes time. We've had the thing for years before it finally started to produce fruit. And the figs are still very small, but they are sweet. That tree has taken a lot of work. Every year we have to bury it and cover it with compost in the fall to protect it from the winter. And then in the spring we have to dig it up and plant it in a shallower hole. However, rather than manure, my family tended to use compost. It's what we had available. Our garden actually had a very large composter. For several years it was big enough that I'd have to go inside the thing to turn over all the mulch. I'd usually do this in the fall after we raked up all the leaves so that I could bury the fresh leaves under the mulch. And although it was a dirty job, I enjoyed doing this. I liked the idea that all that work of raking up the leaves and burying them under the old mulch would just decompose. But then it would turn into something that would feed the garden. Now, part of that mindset is what would eventually help me with my own anxiety. That is, focusing on the task ahead, accepting that I cannot force the fruit to grow, and just going about tending the plant without being concerned whether it will produce fruit. The same mindset helped to dispel those thoughts and feelings of inadequacy. I might not be able to finish this assignment tonight, but if I put work into it now, that's work that I don't have to do later, and it's a step in the right direction. I might feel like a failure in this moment, but if I keep working, then I am accomplishing something, and that is not failure. It's just another part of fertilizing that tree. And eventually this mindset would pay off. I would finish something, and the negative thoughts would be pushed aside for a time. So although our lifetime and our abilities are limited, God keeps giving us chances to be fruitful. Although we might keep falling short of the expectations that we create or that the world imposes on us, God gives us opportunities to improve. And often, God also provides what we need to improve, just like the gardener. God has put many people in my life who have supported me, whether it's teachers who show compassion, or specialists who have been able to explain things about my learning style, or family and friends who have shown belief in me. And there's something else that God has also given. It's that simple human contact, those friendly interactions with another human being. Sometimes they're long, deep conversations where you develop a great understanding of each other. Sometimes it's a short interaction where you both realize that you've done something good for the other person, even if it's only a smile. Sometimes it's completely silent time where you are just around another person and you know that you are not alone. You know you are present with someone and that someone is present for you. At some point, those experiences of human connection started to feel like the gardener tending the tree. You can't always tell what fruit your behavior will produce. But like the gardener, you keep doing it. So I'd like to conclude with a prayer that Martha often uses in her blessing. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel the way with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. Amen.